My name is Chris Goranson. I'm the director of the Parsons Institute for Information Mapping, part of the New School. And we're really excited to have this conference entitled The Future of Security, Ethical Hacking, Big Data in the Crowd. And as you probably gathered from the title, really what we're hoping to do today is cover three pretty disparate topics, right? I mean, I guess at first glance they seem disparate, but really they are interconnected. And I think where we are is we're at sort of an interesting pinnacle here in history where now, you know, a lot of the things that you think of as being your personal information, or maybe don't think of as your personal information, are now being collected and often harvested by various clients. But ultimately, there is an individual responsibility that comes with data, and I hope that some of that comes through, because we think that there's really going to be a convergence where, you know, the whole concept behind big data, right, is taking large disparate data sets and bringing them together, right? It's kind of a marketing term, but that's really what you're doing. The thing is that you're collecting a vast majority of that information now on things like your cell phone, right? So the tides are changing, and I think it's going to be interesting to explore some of those concepts with our speakers. I'm here with Ed Keller, who is heading up the Center for Transformative Media, right up here in the front. Ed's also going to give some introductory remarks this morning. But we really want to thank, first and foremost, both the New School and the Richard Lounsbury Foundation. I think Max Ingerholzer is here, or he's right in front. Thank you. Through generous funding for this conference has really made this possible, and we couldn't have done it without your support, and so we're very grateful for that. Just a bit of housekeeping. The restrooms, if you're not familiar with the facility, are just out the door, down the hall, and to the left. And of course, help yourself throughout the day to the food, beverages, and drinks that we'll have. We will have a lunch. The format for the presentations today is we're basically going to have two panel sessions. Each presenter, we're going to have 4 people in each panel. Each presenter is going to give about a 20-25-minute talk. Depending on how long they go, we're going to save about 5 minutes for Q&A. And then we're going to have a larger panel discussion. And really what we want is your engagement. We want you to engage with the speakers. It's a lot less of a valuable experience if it's just the speakers talking to you. So please feel free to engage and ask questions, and you know, we can explore some of these topics together. In your program, you'll find, of course, the bios and abstracts. Feel free to approach any of the speakers throughout the day. You'll also, just a quick plug, my group, Parsons Institute for Information Mapping, is actually hiring for 2 big data positions. One is a big data evangelist. So you can, if you haven't heard that term in the tech sphere before, it's basically somebody that we're looking for to help promote sort of the innovative thoughts and theories behind big data. The other is a big data information designer. So certainly feel free to contact myself or Jahoon Kong in the back. Jahoon, if you can just raise your hand real quick. He's the Associate Director of PIIM. If either one of those jobs sound appealing to you and want to learn more, please do approach us. We love to really find connections through the New School community where we can really work with some of the fantastic folks through our programs. Finally, just a quick thanks to Ted Byfield, Katie Warner, and Sabrina Farhi. We couldn't have got this conference off the ground without them. And of course, if you have questions throughout the day, feel free to contact us. There is complimentary wireless access in the building. There's a flyer in your program that explains how to get connected to that, along with the Twitter hashtag. We'll try and keep an eye on Twitter if that's your thing and you like to submit questions a little more anonymously. We'll do our best to monitor that as well. So with that, by the way, is anyone attending from the larger New York City Data Week events going on? The O'Reilly Big Data Strata Conference? Anyone know about this? A couple of folks? Okay, good. If you don't know about it, please check it out. New York City Data Week is going on this week. There's a bunch of free programs, seminars, all sorts of things. Many of them are at night. And most of them are in Midtown, but this is really a great conference. So if any of this sounds interesting to you and you want to learn more, it's a great way to just run into other people in the industry. I've been attending a couple of the sessions throughout the week, and they're just fantastic. So anyway, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ed, and he'll take it from there.
Good morning, welcome. My name is Ed Keller. I'm the director of the Center for Transformative Media here at the New School. I have a couple of opening remarks, but first, again, some words of thanks to second what Chris has said. Really want to thank the Richard Lounsbury Foundation for supporting this event and previous events. Really want to thank Chris Goranson and PIIM for offering the extended invitation to collaborate on this and other things that we've done in the past year. It was very generous. Thank the New School and David Van Zandt for creating and sustaining a remarkable platform for academic and speculative work. And a special thanks to my colleague Ted Byfield, who's the Associate Director at the Center for Transformative Media. His insight into the themes of the conference and bringing people to the table has been invaluable, and the speakers, many of whom have traveled quite a bit to get here today. So my opening remarks are drawn from a set of conversations that Chris, Ted, and I had back in the spring when we were first thinking and brainstorming about the event. There are a range of key questions that we could start with. What is security? What is risk? What is precarity? And what are the technological advances that are rapidly changing our understanding of the relations between these terms? For me, some of the most compelling thinking about unanticipated and rapidly emerging situational landscapes comes from the former mathematicians Werner Vinge, former IT system administrator Charles Strauss, and former marine biologist Peter Watts. All of these happen to now be cutting-edge science fiction writers, having left their previous professions. And if we can draw a kind of set of urgent and critical connections across the points of view that we're going to hear today at the event, it would be to take a kind of lesson from the manner within which those writers operate. They think outside the prior paradigms of security, risk, and precarity that we're familiar with. So one could argue that future global security will be increasingly dependent on the interaction between an unprecedented range of actors that operate in a messy and expanded field. It includes biological systems, information, and technology, and that these are all continually mediated by a range of events, from the instantaneous planetary scale crises that we see in the Fukushima earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear disaster, to the very slow-moving progress of diseases like HIV. So I'm putting those two things on the same kind of trajectory as mediators of security. And although the examples lie actually at the opposite ends of the scale in terms of their speed of operation, together I'd say they highlight a key factor of contemporary networks, that crisis response and security in a technologized and biopolitical landscape and the control of those crises depend as much on the information that a person or a population functions as a carrier for as it depends on the skill set of a small percentage of that population. So this is a kind of a paradigm shift, and this idea of embodied information and the technopolitical aspects of the apparatus which regulate it create a new form of sovereignty. So using the very broadest interpretation of the concept of security, we see that the use and misuse of huge data sets, and this goes to the volunteered data set information that Chris was talking about, whether genetic, economic, social graphs, or the like, are altering the economics and politics of insurance, medicine, urban design, food networks. They touch almost everything in everyday life. So you could say that such slow-moving events or catastrophes, kind of tectonic plate shifts of information, present as many challenges to security as the more obvious Fukushima example. And this underscores the accelerating shift away from the value of the individual skill sets towards populations which possess data and knowledge. New mechanisms for sensing, analysis, communication, which we would gloss today as the Internet of Things, give tools for real-time monitoring and response to a general population, not an elite population. Twitter, you see, is used as advanced information network for seismic monitoring, but as we all know, it also acts as a platform which produces and channels volatile political change. And the ability to identify individuals who have data and individuals who are data is increasingly tied to the dynamics of network function and ultimately the kind of resilience and security of those networks. Huge open data sets and an emerging massive addressability in IPv6 space reestablish not only scientific practice but also the ways in which we construe the horizons of individual privacy, agency, and sovereignty. So for example, the accumulation of large DNA data sets has allowed us to study trajectories of inheritance and disease. But when consumer services such as 23andMe make the genetic information of a growing cohort more and more generally available, the legal and political territories which constitute a kind of basic biopolitical sovereignty shift in unprecedented ways. And economies which drive the accumulation and analysis of this data are ever more susceptible to intrusion, both by motivated hackers, to use this term very broadly, but also by our inability to forecast how such data sets might ultimately be used as everyday computational bases grow stronger and stronger. So the biopolitical is thus a new space of security which allows us to both mediate crises as they play out and understand them and predict them in new ways over time. So ultimately, this demands that we rethink the concept of a state of emergency at many levels. And it would suggest, I argue, that a reboot of our definition of the very idea of security is necessary. And again, this is precisely what the presentations and discussions today will be focused on. So with that, I'd like to introduce President David Van Zandt, who's going to open today's event. He's a sociologist, attorney, and visionary in higher education with a record of distinguished academic leadership spanning 3 decades. Prior to leading the new school, he served as Dean of Northwestern School of Law from 1995 to 2010. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks very much, Ed, and good morning, everyone, and welcome here to the new school. It's great to have you here. First of all, I want to congratulate both PIIM and the Center for Transformative Media for working together to put this on, this very important conference. We think of PIIM as sort of, in one sense, our outward-facing part of our academic work here in places like the Center for Transformative Media is where really a lot of that hard academic work gets done. So it's great to see both of you together doing this. I'd also like to thank and acknowledge the Richard Lounsbury Foundation, Max, for the support of this conference. As both Chris and Ed have said, you know, we are looking today at the complex issues that are surrounding cyber and cybersecurity, which have emerged as threats in a number of different ways here in the U.S. and in other countries. In fact, this morning's paper, there were 2 different articles about cybersecurity. One was in the Financial Times about the UK refusing to extradite an American citizen for hacking into the Department of Defense computers. And the other was a report that Saudi Aramco, the national oil company of Saudi Arabia, had been hacked into. So I think those, we tend to think of those are the big headline things that we tend to think of as being part of cybersecurity. I think what this conference is going to do is push us further, as both Chris and Ed said, in looking at security in even a more general or more ubiquitous kind of issue that affects data sets, it affects where we get our information from, and it affects the other things, the kinds of things that appeared in the paper this morning. And I also think it's really vital for the government and private sector to come together and to try to find solutions, to take advantage of resources that are out there, and to work towards building a workforce for this world that's coming. I don't know that you go to too many conferences. I've never been to one where 2 jobs are on offer. That's a first one for me. But I think that points to the fact that the demand for people who are capable of working in this area is tremendous. And I know here at the New School, we are very concerned with preparing enough students to come out and to participate in this very important area. As Chris and Ed were saying, the expansion of the internet and other aspects of the cyber world have really done a lot of good in the world, and they've brought us together. They've made many things possible. They've also, though, as with any good tool, they're an opportunity for nefarious use at times. And I think those are all things we've been thinking about. Again, if you're talking about the Iranians are worried about hacking of their computers in their nuclear programs. But the other side of it is that there's an interdependence that comes from that can be both good and bad. The interdependence is good because we rely on each other. That's the way humans advance, is by working with each other on projects to make life better. On the other hand, we're highly dependent on other people, and if someone lets you down or something happens to that fabric, it's a much bigger problem than it used to be before we had the internet and the ways of communicating effectively together. So I think this is a very important conference to address those issues. I'm very proud that the New School has taken a leadership role in this area. Last October, we hosted a cyber policy roundtable on Capitol Hill in D.C. Again, it was funded by a generous donation from the Richard Lounsbury Foundation. And there we gathered a group of diverse participants from the key stakeholders in the debate, and it really asked them to help us develop a consensus regarding the next steps needed to bolster our cyber defenses in this country. I think there were a few takeaways from that event. First of all, there was a recognition of the need to look at innovative and flexible ways to build an academic curriculum. The educational part of this that I was referring to before. We need people who understand this, who can operate effectively in this world. I think it also came up at that conference as a takeaway, the questions about the ethical underpinnings of hacking itself and how it can be used for good or for ill. around the world. There's also a need, and we learned at that conference, for good social science understanding of how the cyberspace is used and how it creates the value that I was talking about before. And finally, there's really a need to design solutions. We see today's conference as a natural progression from that roundtable. You have a great list of presenters who will dig more deeply into many of these topics. And we're going to move from ethical hacking to structuring and analyzing big data networks, to leveraging crowdsourcing, to decentralize and expand the cyber workforce, which is very important. The New School sees this whole area as a massive and largely untapped resource for job creation and academic evolution. And this is really at the heart of the New School's tradition. I often say the New School is really two things. It's about creativity, innovation, challenging the status quo, trying to find, look at things from a different angle. And it's also, though, about social engagement, being engaged with the real problems of the world and not being an abstract ivory tower kind of place. And I think this conference, this effort, the work of both the Center and PIIM, all of that is important because it plays on our excellence here at the New School in both design and the social science. So I thank you all for your interest in these issues today. I know it's going to be a great discussion. I will say that if you do have a few moments and you're walking up Fifth Avenue, we have a beautiful new building going up that's making us all very happy. But please, take some time to walk around campus. There's students all around, and I hope you find it enjoyable. Again, have a great day, and thank you for joining us.